The brakes on his semi failed. The catastrophic crash killed 4 Coloradans. We now know that prosecutors celebrated that driver's conviction with a trophy made out of a truck brake and bragged about it online. Our COVID tests come back positive or negative. There's actually a hidden number. Some of us are really close to the line and never know it. A plan to pay Aurora police some bonuses out of pandemic funds. It raises a question of who deserves a cash thank you for helping us through the pandemic. And a holiday tradition involving more patience and focus than we have on next. The 110-year prison sentence for the driver of that runaway truck that crashed, killing 4 people, that is one of the most closely watched, closely scrutinized sentences in Colorado in recent years. Today we learned that prosecutors celebrated putting him away for life by making a trophy out of a truck brake. We learned about this because the prosecutor bragged about her trophy on Facebook. Pretty brazen gloating over a trial, as millions of people have now signed a petition asking the governor to reduce the truck driver's sentence. Here's Steve Sager.
I thought, oh no, social media again.
That is very likely what the first Judicial District Attorney Alexis King thought too when she was first confronted with this new PR problem. Her lead prosecutor on the Rogelio Aguilera Medeiros case posting on social media thanking her fellow deputy district attorney for giving her this trophy. Quote, "He turned a brake shoe from a semi-truck into a memento," prosecutor Kayla Wildman wrote. "What a special gift from a truly special person. I never asked for a new BFF at work, let alone one that is old enough to be my father. No offense, laughy face, but sure am grateful this trial brought you into my career." The makeshift trophy includes a plaque with the words "Power Move" attached to the brake shoe.
You can go home and have a quiet celebration, but this was in poor taste.
Former Denver Chief Deputy District Attorney Craig Silverman agrees with DA Alexis King, who also said this post and the trophy were in poor taste.
Tim Patrick scored a big touchdown in the Broncos game, then he got a taunting flag. Should he have done that? No, he should not. And as it turned out, it led to the other team scoring right away. It's a mistake. It happens, especially with people who aren't in the end zone that much.
It's a very inhumane way for a prosecutor to view her job.
Defense attorney David Lane says the post says a lot about Wildman's profession.
Too many prosecutors view their jobs as gamesmanship. It's a game, it's a contest. If you win, it doesn't matter what the human cost is.
DA Alexis King didn't say very much about this today, only that she's handling the matter internally.
I think this is bad. I don't think it's a firing offense, but it's a cautionary tale about social media and people who do trials.
Aguilera Medeiros was sentenced last week to 110 years in prison. It's a sentence that's gotten a lot of scrutiny. 4.5 million people have signed a petition asking the governor to commute his sentence. DA Alexis King said in a statement that she would welcome a reconsideration of the prison term, which is actually a lot like what Craig Silverman was talking about there. He says there's a lot of fuss about this right now, but he sees the DA stepping in and acknowledging the fact that this is an excessive sentence and going into that reconsideration phase and fighting to try to bring this down. She has made the statement that she's open to reconsidering the sentence.
I think people get that folks in difficult professions often deal with some type of gallows humor around the office to make light of some of the tough stuff they see. That said, there are also ethical requirements for people like law enforcement officers and prosecutors. I mean, we think back to what happened in Aurora, where we had those police officers go back to the scene and mock what happened there.
Yeah.
And that led to serious repercussions.
And in this case, it was more of this is a fellow colleague giving me something to acknowledge my work in this job. The brake shoe part of it may not have entered into her mind when she posted this on social media, but obviously it sends a really strong message, and when it gets out there publicly, it's yet another reason why social media can do this kind of thing.
Out there publicly because she bragged about it publicly. Somebody didn't, take a surreptitious photo. All right, thank you, Steve. So, our COVID tests, they come back each time they say positive or negative. It makes sense when you think, though, that sometimes the test is not clear cut. Sometimes it's pretty iffy whether or not somebody's positive. We've told you that the tests are trending downward in Colorado in terms of the overall positivity rate. Marshall Zellinger digs into a number that is soon to get more attention.
Welcome to your post-high school science class. Today's lesson is cycle threshold.
Cycle threshold is basically a term that we use when we're doing a molecular test.
Dr. David Beckham, not that guy, this one. He's helping me as I kick around terms like cycle threshold to help you understand how your COVID test comes back positive or negative.
When you run these molecular tests for these viruses, it gives you a number. It doesn't give you a plus or a minus.
Just like a pregnancy test, the positive or negative is really a value that's converted into an easy-to-understand symbol. Cycle threshold is a term you should know because the NFL just changed its protocols for when a vaccinated player who tests positive for COVID can come back and play. One of the ways they can be cleared is having their PCR tests come back with a cycle threshold value of 35 or greater. I know that sounds like gibberish, but here's how we can make it simple. Mako Medical, for example, is one of the free testing sites around the state. I found out today that lab's cycle threshold is 35. So if your test comes back with a number greater than 35, it means either you don't have the virus or you have little active virus that it's unlikely you're infectious, and so you receive a negative result. If your test comes back with a number lower than 35, it means you have enough active virus that you're likely infectious, and your test comes back positive.
So you have to kind of pick a number where you say, okay, above this number, it's just background noise. And then below this number, based on our, controls and other tests that we've done, below this number, it's a real positive and it's really there.
Not all providers have the same cycle threshold value. At COVID Check Colorado, another provider of free testing in the state, many of the tests are run by Summit Biolabs. That company told me it sets its cycle threshold at 36. Again, anything higher, negative. Anything lower, positive. Each lab sets its own cycle threshold. Why are the cycle thresholds different depending on the lab? And the simple answer, different machines. Kyle, the value comes in handy for doctors treating patients. According to Dr. Beckham, if he sees someone in the hospital for months, sometimes he'll ask for the CT value so he can see how much of the virus is still in that patient to know if they're getting better.
That makes sense when you think about it like that. So obviously, Marshall, they're making a value judgment about whether it would be more trouble to get false positives or false negatives, and that's where they kind of lay down the bar.
Right, and so different labs have different numbers, and part of that reason, I guess, for certain thinking is you'd rather rope some negative people into the positive range versus positive people going out and about because their tests showed they were negative because you set that value too low.
Yeah, and people do get tested a number of times to get that confirmatory test. All right, thank you, Marshall. We're seeing this wonderful sustained drop in Colorado's COVID hospitalizations right now. We're down to 1,082 patients. Let's hope we can get under 1,000 this week. We're down 90 from Friday and down more than 200 patients from a week ago today. The weekly test positivity rate is staying relatively steady, though. It's at 6.7% today. Public health experts would really like to see it under 5%. It was way up near 10% and fell and just kind of has gotten stuck. Aurora Police, a department in transition and turmoil these days. APD is subject to a settlement that requires more transparency in different types of policing. The officers have been warned by their chief to follow the rules or leave. Now, conservatives on Aurora City Council want to reward those officers who have stayed with bonuses from pandemic relief funds. Democratic Socialist on council says he doesn't think that this is about employee retention.
I'm all for a retention program, but this, honestly, what the proposal before us tonight is just pure politics. I think this is them trying to appeal to their conservative base to kind of hug box the police department, basically. And I don't need to, I think, go into that much detail explaining why that might not, I think, necessarily be the right approach in our city.
My hope, is that our officers will recognize that this is a policy move by city council to say that we support the police department. And I think from my perspective, officers certainly could leave, but I hope that they recognize they have an elected body that recognizes the work they're doing.
If approved, every uniformed APD officer would get $8,000 in a bonus, $4,000 in April, $4,000 in October. Council members Juan Marcano, who's on the left, and Curtis Gardner, who's on the right, did agree today that they would like to see a bonus structure for a wider group of first responders.
What I think we need to do is actually set up a real retention program that involves both of our public safety agencies, because while we've had a lot of attrition with APD, we have historically also had some attrition with Aurora Fire Rescue. And the bigger issue there is that we basically act as a farm team for South Metro and for Denver Fire. So we need to, I think really set up a retention program that allows us to look at the quality of work, quality of life for our public servants there, and make sure that we're actually addressing the issues for both of our public service agencies. That might include a retention bonus for both agencies, to ensure that we're not demoralizing one while looking like we're favoring the other.
I have concerns that we are not including our firefighters and that we're not including the folks in our 911 dispatch center. I lobbied my colleagues that also signed this letter to include those groups. And I think it's important to also recognize both the sacrifice they've made and the retention issues that we're seeing in those areas as well. Fire department is not seeing as many separations as the police department, though certainly the 911 dispatch center is. And I think in general, it's important to recognize that public safety is not just police. Public safety includes our fire department and our 911 dispatch center.
So Aurora City Council votes on this tonight. In theory, officer could get the bonus and then leave for a new job immediately. They would need to stay through next October to get the second half of the bonus, and Councilman Gardner noted that by then, new academy recruits would be joining the force. Denver City Council votes on a possible settlement tonight, more than 3 years after police shot and killed somebody in a case of mistaken identity. The Denver District Attorney's Office says the officers thought that they were chasing Mauricio Venzor-Gonzalez that night. Venzor-Gonzalez was an inmate who'd escaped from Denver Health back in 2018. Detectives tried to stop an SUV leaving his house that day. That led to a chase. The DA's office says after the SUV crashed, officers fired toward it. Venzor-Gonzalez was not in the vehicle. 2 guys in the vehicle were shot. One of them died. The settlement is for $365,000. Proved that comes 2 months after City Council gave the go-ahead to a $1.2 million settlement in a separate case. Venzor-Gonzalez, the escapee, was eventually caught later that year. Big thank you to everybody who helped with last week's Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign. You filled backpacks with games and electronics and a bunch of fun distractions for young people who are in the hospital this holiday season. You raised $19,000 since last Wednesday for the nonprofit Bags of Fun, which is now expanding its longtime mission of providing backpacks of games and toys to kids who face a life-threatening diagnosis, to also give those backpacks to teenagers who are leaving Denver Health's inpatient mental health program. Your Word of Thanks campaigns have now raised $5.4 million for Colorado's small to mid-sized nonprofits since last year. I'll be back on Wednesday night with an idea of how we can provide homes for the holidays. Coloradans serving in the military are being asked politely not to overthrow their own government. You would hope that'd go without saying, and a holiday tradition requiring incredible patience for a beautiful result. Next. 10 Coloradans are charged in connection with the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Not one of them active duty military, so far as we know. But dozens of suspected insurrectionists are in the military, which led the Pentagon to ask politely today that American service members not try to overthrow the American government. The Pentagon reiterated that banned extremist activities include fundraising for extremist groups or supporting their content on social media, or, say, storming the U.S. Capitol to interrupt the certification of an American presidential election. The Pentagon says its rules are based on behavior, not beliefs. So the Pentagon pointed out a service member could have what it considers to be extremist propaganda, like to read it, but is not allowed to distribute it. Could go to a rally to observe, but not to participate. That certainly seems like a tricky line to enforce.
This is the last day and evening of fall. The winter solstice tomorrow at 8:59 in the morning, and we've got a Pacific storm on the way, so maybe a new month, a new weather pattern. The storm coming in may bring some snow to some areas of the state just in time for Christmas. Temperatures have been running way above average, 15 degrees above average. This trend continues until Thursday, when this trough off the coast of California moves in. Right now, we're just tracking high and mid-level clouds that'll move through. Not a lot of moisture for us until Thursday and Friday, and that's kind of what you'll find on Futurecast. So, calm and quiet tonight with our low around freezing. Tomorrow, partly sunny early, mostly sunny afternoon, high 60. Warm weather trend continues Wednesday. The solstice marks the beginning of winter on Tuesday. Heavy mountain snow Friday, and maybe a little snow here in Denver early Friday morning. Saying there's a chance.
Extravagant holiday displays tend to get all the attention on TV, but this year, Next is celebrating a little holiday cheer. Christina sent us a wee bit of cheer from Littleton. It's basically a two-story Charlie Brown tree, complete with a single ornament. She says her neighbors do this every year. You know, typically the nativity scene has a lot more animals than just the cow, but the cow alone is nice. That's tasteful. I like that. Monica sent this photo of her little bit of cheer in Brighton. Denver's traffic deaths aren't dropping, so city leaders will vote on dropping the speed limit all over the city. Hey, look, a nice relaxing hobby for our free time at the holidays.
Just when you think you've mastered something, you try something else that just frustrates the heck out of you.
Nope, not relaxing at all. At least the end result's nice. Next. So Denver isn't the most fast-paced city in the world, but I wouldn't describe it as slow by any means. And actually, neither do Safe Streets advocates, who want City Council to lower the city's neighborhood speed limit tonight. Take it from 25 miles per hour to 20 on all those side streets where the speed limit isn't regularly posted. As of today, 82 people have died in traffic crashes in the city this year. Despite 5 years of the city's Vision Zero project aiming for 0 deaths, sorry about that camera work, deaths actually haven't even dropped in the last 5 years. So this is the season where the master rappers, my mother-in-law, stand out in a sea of subpar gift packagers like myself, usually go into the gift bag if I can. A group skilled at unceasing creasing of paper has created another special creation this year. A dozen origami artists from the East Denver Origami Society carefully folded a tree of paper this year for the First Universalist Church of Denver. 6 patterns, all color coordinated.
Well, you throw away a lot of paper. It's magic. It's like magic to me that you can take a plain piece of paper and create something so beautiful out of it.
Start with something so simple, end up with something so gorgeous. Brenda Sheldon there said, the time it takes to make each ornament depends on your skill. You don't say. She said it's about 30 minutes for a beginner, 15 for an expert. Something tells me the beginner ones don't look like the expert ones in the end. We're back with a blast from our past and your feedback next. Jonathan Ulrich writes in tonight to say, I hope you mentioned Douglas County lighting itself on fire. I don't know that I have anything to add to my colleagues' reporting over the weekend. It was dangerously dry out there. Douglas County commissioners went ahead with 3 fireworks shows anyway, and they managed to set fires at all 3 of those locations. It would honestly be more surprising if Douglas County hadn't set itself on fire. We'll see you next time.